President Trump is now kind of proposing raising taxes on the rich as a way to fund tax cuts for middle and working class Americans. What does this mean? Well, remember, President Trump has been proposing the largest tax cuts in history. That's what he campaigned on. And over the last couple of months, he and the White House put together a proposal to cut taxes for pretty much everybody. But there's a couple problems with that. When you cut taxes, you also need to continue being able to fund government expenses and government spending. And this is one of the reasons why you've been seeing the United States government cut a lot of expenses through DOGE, finding waste, finding contracts they can eliminate, finding departments that they can eliminate. But in addition to that, we still have a lot of government expenses. And this is where now the White House is saying that they're considering also raising taxes on the rich and wealthy as a way to fund some of the tax breaks for lower and middle income Americans. Now, this tax proposal hasn't been approved just yet, but there are three main proposals from the Trump tax cuts. Number one, it is to cut taxes, income taxes across the board, because at the end of 2025, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to expire. What does that mean? If you work to earn a salary, you have been paying lower tax rates since President Trump's first term, because in President Trump's first term in 2017, he passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which essentially cut income taxes across the board, whether you were a low income earner or a high income earner. Well, in the end of 2025, this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire, which means that income taxes for pretty much everybody, low income, middle income, and high income Americans would go up. And this is where President Trump is saying he doesn't want that to happen. He wants to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to extend these tax cuts for everybody. Number two, he wants to keep corporate taxes low in the United States. And number three, he also wants to use tariff income to help fund some of these tax cuts. But now, very recently, we just got news saying that there's a new proposal that's potentially being added to raise taxes on rich people. What does that mean? Well, right now, the proposal has the top income tax rate, the federal tax rate, capped off at 37%. But now President Trump is considering allowing the rate to go up on individuals making $2.5 million or more a year, to go from 37% to 39.6% as a way to continue funding Medicaid and to pay for the tax cuts for middle and working class Americans. And here's what President Trump said about this, quote, "The problem with even a tiny tax increase for the rich, which I and all others would graciously accept in order to help the lower and middle income workers, is that the radical left Democrat lunatics would go around screaming. In any event, Republicans should probably not do it, but I'm okay if they do it." So President Trump is saying that he is okay now with raising taxes on these high income earners to help fund some of these tax cuts. But I want you to understand why this all matters, what this means for you, and what might be coming in the future. And I want to remind you that we do cover all of this information in Market Briefs. Again, Market Briefs is my free financial newsletter, where every day my team is working to break down what's happening in things like the economy, stocks, housing, crypto, and the global economy into a fun, witty, and easy to read newsletter. Plus, now, when you join Market Briefs, you'll also get my free investing masterclass as a bonus just for joining Market Briefs. So if you want to get Market Briefs plus the investing masterclass, all you have to do is click the link down in the description below. Now, this is a very sensitive topic, but I'm not here to talk politics. I just want you to understand what's going on. The United States government kind of operates like a business with a free money printer on the back end. What does that mean? The United States government has one source of income, and that source of income is tax dollars from taxpayers. And the problem we've been seeing with the United States government is that they've been spending more money than what they bring in. I'll show you what I mean. In 2024, the United States government generated $4.9 trillion in taxes. Now, you might think that if the government generated $4.9 trillion in taxes, they should spend, let's call it $4.8 trillion in taxes. That would have some extra money as a cushion or buffer to save for emergencies or to invest. But that's not what happened. They generated $4.9 trillion, but spent $6.75 trillion. How did they fund that? Through the help of debt. This is what created the $1.8 trillion deficit. It's actually a little bit more than that, but the 1.8 some trillion dollar deficit in 2024. What does that mean? The United States government spent almost $2 trillion they didn't have in 2024 and injected this money into the economy, and then people become reliant on that money. Because if you are employed by the government, if you are a contractor getting jobs from the government, or you are an agency that's getting funding from the United States government, now you have people that have livelihoods, that have salaries, that have jobs relying on this government spending. Well, the problem is this government spending is not coming from actual money that the government has, it's coming from debt. And right now, the United States government has more than $36 trillion of national debt. And the reason why this matters is because this national debt, while a lot of people think it's just an invisible number out there, it does have implications. Because every single year, the United States government has to pay interest on this national debt. Not just that, this national debt is growing day after day after day. Now, if you have any sort of credit card debt, you know what this can feel like when your credit card balance keeps growing, your minimum payments keep rising. And the fastest growing expense for the United States government is none other than interest payments. Why? Because number one, obviously interest rates are high, but number two, our national debt levels are growing still very fast. So you can start to see the problem. More and more tax dollars are now being used just to pay interest expenses as opposed to building bridges, as opposed to funding firefighters, as opposed to paying for Medicare, as opposed to actually providing value to society. And so now what the government is having to do is they're paying interest with the tax dollars, and then they're going into debt to continue funding more things for its citizens. And you start to build this negative problem. More and more people become reliant on government spending, and so the government has to keep spending in order to keep people happy, in order to keep the economy moving, and they have to do that through more debt, which then also devalues the dollar, which has the next problem, which is inflation. Because when the United States government goes out and borrows, say, trillions of dollars, like they've been doing, where does this money come from? Now, yes, the United States government can borrow money from you and I by issuing treasury bonds. They can borrow money from foreign countries like China and Japan, who are actually the largest foreign country investors in the United States, but they can also borrow money from the Federal Reserve Bank, which is something that they've been doing. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank of the United States, but they're actually not federal. It says so on their website. They're not a part of the United States government. They're not a reserve because they're not sitting on any cash reserves. And they're not a bank because you and I can't deposit money there. So if they're not a reserve, they're not sitting on any cash, how do they lend money to the United States government? Well, they have to print that money. So if the Federal Reserve Bank now has to lend the United States government, let's call it $1 trillion that they don't have, that means the Federal Reserve Bank has to print $1 trillion and then lend it to the United States government, which the United States government has to ultimately pay back, but our debt balance keeps growing. Well, what does that mean? Not only does the debt grow, and the United States government has to pay more interest through your tax dollars, but that also means that $1 trillion was just created out of thin air. And this money now just entered our economic circulation. Now, I'm hoping that you can start to see why that could be a problem, because if we just keep creating more and more dollars, because our paper dollars, remember, they're not backed by any precious metal. It's not backed by physical gold. It's just a piece of paper that says it has value. Well, what happens? That's what is the cause of inflation. Inflation comes from the word inflate. What are we inflating? The monetary supply. We're creating more dollars. And so when the United States government keeps going deeper into debt, we're also now creating more dollars, which devalues each dollar, which means the savings that you have in your bank account now have less buying power. Your salary can't stretch as far. And so you can start to see this dual-edged sword, because now we've started to see the impact of inflation over the last 5 years. Well, this has been happening for decades. And now we're in this situation where a lot of people, a lot of businesses a lot of entities are reliant on the United States government spending. Because remember, the largest spender in our economy is not Amazon or Apple, it's the United States government. I mean, they spent $6.75 trillion in 2024. And that spending is paying somebody's salary. It's paying some business's revenue. It's paying for things that are used in the economy. So when the government pays you, you now have money to buy a house, buy a car, buy a vacation. And now when the government starts to cut their spending, yeah, it might make sense to help balance the budget, but the problem is that means somebody's getting laid off. And that person doesn't have the ability to pay for their mortgage or pay for their car. That means the business might go bankrupt because they were relying on government contracts. While at the same time, we have to think about inflation, which impacts everybody. We have to think about the national debt, which impacts everybody, because the bigger the national debt, the more tax dollars that have to be used to pay back the interest. And this is where it's a very difficult problem. And nobody wants to be in the position to actually cut government spending, because that means that people are going to get hurt. That means the economy is going to get hurt. I mean, it's a fact. If you were to reduce our economy by trillions of dollars of spending, it means the economy is going to shrink, period. And the United States government right now is spending trillions of dollars every year. They don't have. And if you were to shrink our economy by 10%, well, you bet that that's going to have an impact, a ripple effect in the economy. So you can start to see the problem. While at the same time, inflation continues to hurt the average person. And this is why I want you to understand what's going on. Now, I know this video was about taxes, but you can start to see how everything starts to tie into one another. Taxes are one form of revenue. It's the form of revenue for the United States government. And the key here that I want you to understand, as a licensed attorney, who's not your attorney, is we can't control everything that the government does. A Republican is going to have a different policy than a Democrat, and different Democrats are going to have different policies than different Republicans, and most people want to argue politics. And that's fine, you can do whatever you want. But at the same time, what I want you to do is understand, how do you build your wealth? Period. Because we know taxes are going to go up, we know taxes are going to go down. In general, taxes over the long term, especially if you're under the age of 50, you're probably going to see taxes go up at some point in your lifetime to fund all of this government spending. And so if that's the case, you need to understand the system. And what I mean by that is our tax code rewards you as an investor with lower tax rates. When you earn your money as a W-2 employee, you are paying the highest tax rates and you get the lowest tax breaks. It's called ordinary income. Some people call it earned income. But when you earn your money as an investor, now you get to qualify for either lower tax rates or bigger tax breaks. That's what the tax code says. And this is why I want you to understand this, because a lot of people get caught up on the politics. And yes, it is important, but I also want you to understand the importance of building your own wealth. And it is important to work hard. It's important to do good things, but you also want to understand the system, because that can allow you to use your hard work and amplify it much faster. Because if you're paying twice in taxes what somebody else does, you have to work effectively twice as hard to build the same level of wealth. And that's why I want you to understand this. And that's why I want you to understand the importance of investing your money for the long term, because that's what's going to allow you to really build wealth. Yes, we all know, if you've been watching my channel, that investing is how you can grow your money. Investing is what wealthy people do. But from a tax perspective, investing is also a way for you to pay less money in taxes, because when you earn your money as an investor, you can qualify for lower tax rates. So, a lot of changes are going to be coming in the tax law. I'll be keeping you posted here on my channel as we get more tax news. We'll also be keeping you posted on market briefs. Plus, you can get my investing masterclass, which the link is for you down in the description. But the key here, regardless of what happens, is for you to worry about your house and to take care of your family's wealth. And you start by spending your money smartly and becoming an investor. And with that, I will see you on YouTube tomorrow.